Okay, so the next step we're doing here is we're going to place our front skirt pieces along the side to the back of the skirt, and we're going to stitch the front to the back along the sides. So I have my back piece facing me on the right side, and then I'm going to take one of my front skirt pieces, turn it around so that the right side is facing the right side of my skirt, of my back piece. And I'm going to line that up along the sides, make sure that the single notch is lined up and the double notch is also lined up too. Okay. Alright, so we're going to straighten that out, make sure that our pocket is not folded up or crinkled up underneath. Okay. Alright, looks like we got that done. So we're going to proceed pinning this side in place. And just like before with the pockets, I'm going to take my seam gauge ruler. I'm going to measure 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge, and then I'm going to pin my pins at the 5/8 inch mark, because it was so helpful in the pockets step. I'm going to do it again with the skirt side step. Okay, now the first one's in, I'm going to double check and see if it's in the right spot. Alright, it's a little bit crooked. I think I'm going to fix that. Because these pins are going to help me out in getting an accurate 5/8 of an inch seam. Alright. So let's get the rest of this side pinned. Alright, so I got this side of my skirt all nicely pinned. Right at the 5/8 inch seam allowance specified in the project. So it looks like I got a little bit more fabric length on my front skirt piece than I do on my back skirt piece. That you'll run into from time to time. However, it's going to be okay because this little unevenness here is happening on the hem. And the hem can always be trimmed to a more even length. So, if you run into this type of issue, make sure this issue is happening on the hem instead of up here on the waist. The waist you need to be even. The waistline needs to be even. So, if you run into that problem, make sure you choose the waistline as the place to be even and just leave the hem uneven where you can essentially trim it later. Alright, so now I've got that pinned. I'm going to proceed with the other front skirt piece and pin it just so. As I've done before, I'm going to place my front skirt pattern piece right side on top of the right side of my back piece here, making sure that my edge notches are even. Going to make sure the waistline is even as well. Make sure that everything's nice and straight at the hem too, which has a bit of a unevenness there at like the other skirts. So fortunately, as I've mentioned earlier, you can afford some unevenness at the hem of your project because that part will be trimmed anyway. So as long as the waistline is even and your side is even, the hem can stay a little uneven and we can fix that later. So, since I am right-handed, I have to make sure that when I feed my project through the machine, my material will always stay on the left. So, for this particular side, I have flipped my project over and I'm going to pin it in place from this side where the back is instead. Okay, so I got that evened up, and now I'm going to take my seam gauge, if I can find it. There it is. And I'm going to measure 5/8 of an inch from the raw edge, and I'm going to mark that spot with a pin. So this pin will do double duty for me. It'll hold my pieces in place, and it will be a helpful guide to show me where 5/8 of an inch is and help me keep my stitch where it needs to be. Okay, that looks right. Okay, great. So now we've got our other front skirt pattern pinned to our skirt back along the sides. And we're going to now move to the sewing machine where we're going to baste stitch the sides of our skirt in place. Okay, so first we're going to make sure, that our thread tail is nice and long and it's laying behind our presser foot. We're going to put our project underneath our presser foot. And this time around, we'll be able to see our 5/8 inch guide, which for me is this piece of tape here. So right at the edge of this tape is 5/8 of an inch. And unlike before, I can see my fabric lining up along the edge of my 5/8 inch marker on my machine. So between that and the pins, I should be able to get a nice straight basting stitch 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. Okay, so I'm just going to carefully put my presser foot down. I'm going to make sure that my needle is where it needs to be. Okay, so I'm just going to try and get this as close to the top edge as possible. Okay, that looks good. So everything is set. I'm going to pull out my pin, my first pin, and I'm going to go and make this basting stitch happen. So what you've done, we lift up our presser foot along with our needle, get a little thread tail, and snip it in half. Okay. I've now sewn the back skirt piece to one of my front skirt pieces. As you can see here, where the side of my one front skirt piece is joined to the back. So here we have the inside of our wrap skirt. Here's our front skirt piece. Here is our back skirt piece. Joined together here along the sides with a simple long basting stitch. And here's what it looks like in the front of our skirt. Over here we got our front skirt piece, and over here we've got our back skirt piece. And just to point out, we've got our line, our skirt hemline nicely lined up, at least with this skirt here. But don't worry, we're going to be trimming as we hem, so if there's a little unevenness along the hem, don't worry about it. That can always be fixed. So now that I've done that with this skirt side, I'm going to proceed with the other side of the skirt and base stitch it in place. So I got my project under my presser foot with the raw edge lined up against the edge of my 5/8 of an inch tape marker on my machine. I'm going to put down my presser foot, and then I'm going to place my needle inside the machine. Okay, I could put this closer to the top, so I'll lift my presser foot again and scooch my project a little bit further down. Put back my presser foot, and let's see where my needle is. Okay, this will work. So as I previously done on the other side, I'm going to take my pin out, and I'm going to make a long basting stitch 5/8 of an inch away from my raw edge. Alright, now that we're done, we're going to hand crank the needle, make sure it's in the upright position before we lift our presser foot, pull out the thread, and snip it off the machine. Alright, now we've got our other skirt sewn along the side. As you can see here, we've got our skirt front and our skirt back. Nicely base stitched together. So let me turn it around. We've got a nice long basting stitch right here with our skirt sides sewn in place. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this out. You can have a good look, or as good a look as I can make it. So here is what our wrap skirt looks like at this point. Essentially a very large piece, almost like a circle skirt laid flat. So when we put it all together and we wrap it in place, this is what it's going to look like eventually. We're not quite there yet, but it is coming along. So it's starting to look like the picture on the envelope, right? We're not there yet. We still got a couple more steps to do. Okay, so the next step in this project is we're going to fold along this fold line right here. We're going to fold that inward. The instructions call this section of the skirt the self-facing. So here we're going to fold this edge on the inside. So that means the wrong sides will be meeting each other. We're going to pin at the top this self-facing. up here. According to the instructions, we're supposed to finish our edges first before folding the self-facing inward. But for this particular project, we are making a practice skirt, so we're not going to do that. We're going to keep these edges raw as they are. Instead, we're going to measure 5/8 inches from the top of the skirt. And then we're going to place a pin along the 5/8 inch line. Okay, that looks good. And we're going to baste stitch this part in place. So, now that I've got that done, I'm going to do the same thing with the other front skirt piece. So to recap, here along the front skirt piece, we have our fold line along the edge, right here. So here we're going to fold this edge on the inside. So that means the wrong sides will be meeting each other. We're going to pin at the top this self-facing. So right up here. According to the instructions, we're supposed to finish our edges first before folding the self-facing inward. But for this particular project, we are making a practice skirt, so we're not going to do that. We're going to keep these edges raw as they are. Instead, we're going to measure 5/8 inches from the top of the skirt, and then we're going to place a pin along the 5/8 inch line. Okay, that looks good. And we're going to baste stitch this part in place. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to do the same thing with the other front skirt piece. So to recap, here along the front skirt piece, we have our fold line along the edge, right here. Okay, so on our front skirt edge, we've got a fold line right here. And we're going to take this and we're going to fold it inward, just so. Wrong sides will be facing each other. And thanks to our helpful marking previously, we know where to fold the edge of the front skirt piece. Okay. So now that we've done that, we're going to do what we did previously with the other side. We're going to measure 5/8 of an inch away from the top skirt edge. We're going to place a pin carefully. Oh, that's a bit crooked. Let me fix that. Okay, now we're going to double check, make sure that this is right where it needs to be, which it is. Alright, so got that pinned. I'm going to take that to my sewing machine and I'm going to baste stitch the self-facing up at the top of the skirt, 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. Okay, so we're going to have our project under our presser foot with the raw edge next to the edge of our 5/8 inch tape marker on our sewing machine. We're going to hand crank our needle down, make sure that is also at 5/8 of an inch, which it is. We're going to pull out our pin and just make a little basting stitch to keep our self-facing in place. Alright, so I'm going to put my needle in the upright position, lift my presser foot, pull it out from the machine, and cut the thread tail. And now I'm going to do the same exact move on the other side. Okay, again, my thread tail is lying behind my presser foot. My project will be underneath the presser foot. Make sure that the raw edge is next to the edge of my 5/8 of an inch tape marker. I'm going to put down my presser foot, crank down my needle, make sure everything is at 5/8 of an inch, which it is. Pull out my pin and do another short basting stitch to keep myself facing in place. Okay, my needle is in the up position. I can lift my presser foot, pull my project out, and cut the thread. Okay, I have my skirt self-facings nicely positioned along the back of my skirt project, right here and right here. So just to open things up and see, so here is the back of my skirt, and now I'm going to flip it over and show what the front of the skirt looks like. Alright, so here's what the front of my skirt looks like. And as you can see, the edges of the front wrap part are folded inward thanks to baste stitching the self-facing behind. Alright, so time to do the next step.